It's episode 33. Sarah is a motivator, entrepreneur, visionary, and business expert. She's pitched to Dragon's Den. She's able to turn a product idea into trading within 3 months. She has the ability to scale businesses up. Sarah's been there, got the t-shirt, and won awards along the way. Please enjoy the episode, and thanks for being a fab listener. Support me by subscribing and telling your friends. Welcome to the Johnny Ross audio experience. I'm Johnny Ross, founder and digital marketing strategist of Fleek Marketing. Each podcast I'll be bringing you an expert to inspire you, to give you some great business growth takeaways, and to get you thinking about marketing and the bigger picture of how businesses can improve, adapt and grow. I look forward to sharing this with you on each podcast, so here we go. Hello and welcome to another live Q&A. Today I've got Sarah Agar-Brennan with me. How are you, Sarah?
I'm good, thank you, yes.
So Sarah is founder of the Maple Agency. You also work for the University of Huddersfield and York, helping businesses. The Maple Agency that you're in the middle of launching that very shortly, aren't you?
Oh.
That just very quickly tell us what you've set up there.
Yeah, so basically it's just bringing amazing business people and services together to kind of facilitate growth for other businesses. I've got a great network around me. I started doing projects together. There was half a dozen people that were involved, and I started to think, you know what, actually we need to put ourselves out there to be able to let people know that there's a tried and tested method here for growth, and that's the Maple Agency. And
your background has been very much in product. You've had a number of product businesses. You've even taken a product to Dragon's Den, haven't you?
I have indeed, and that was a wonderful experience. Yeah,
well, I'd quite like to tap into that, but also in terms of one of the things that you've learned along the way is all the barriers to setting up a business, but also to getting a product to market. And I think, having spoken to you a number of times, one of the key things that the Maple Agency can do, or certainly yourself, is help people that have got this idea and help them, get across these hurdles and break down these barriers.
Yeah. I mean, it's like anything, isn't it? I think knowledge is king, and I think that what happens is when you've got a burning desire to bring a product to market, you don't always know all the other stuff, the tried and tested methods, the things, and it's great to come across someone like me and my team, because we've kind of fallen over and we've got back up, and we know all the problems that have arisen, and we can kind of go, hey, you can shortcut that by doing this, or you can shortcut that by dealing with this company. And inevitably, it means that we've refined the process ourselves over the years, and so we can help them bring it to market much, much quicker. So you're learning by my mistakes, basically. And I made a lot of mistakes. I've made a lot of mistakes.
Well, just to remind people that are watching or listening, we're live on LinkedIn, we're live on YouTube, we're live in our Facebook group, the Yorkshire Business Club. If you're listening, thanks for being a listener. And please do subscribe if you're looking for more content like this. So we're on any of the podcast platforms you can imagine. We've got lots we could talk about, but there's been a big thing in the news. Of course, Sarah Everard has been murdered, and it's created a huge public conversation and debate. And we were just talking about that just before we went live, and I think it would be quite good just to talk about that a bit, because you are a woman in business, and I know you've had some conversations even just this weekend with family. But just to keep it for a moment, we talked about Dragon's Den there just for a second. What was that even like as a woman? Was that a difficult environment, or was that the opposite, and was that very welcoming as a woman? What was your experience in that as a woman?
I think as a woman, it was definitely very welcoming. Definitely, there's a lot of female producers. It was just really a warm environment for a woman. I didn't feel at any stage that I felt uncomfortable or anything. I think they're definitely, the equality that is there is brilliant. I can't say the same for other aspects of my career and other aspects of running a business, but I certainly think that experience as an isolated experience was it's funny. I don't want to say it was fantastic. It was fantastic from that regard. There were lots of things that, if you ever listen to any of the other stuff I've ever talked about Dragon's Den, there were lots of other sides to Dragon's Den that weren't such a great experience for me. But that particular aspect was definitely a positive.
But what I'm hearing there is it's probably the complete opposite of the reality of a typical workplace and a typical working environment. Is that fair to say?
I am very blessed right now in the managers that I have. They're amazing. I think that go back 10 years and the men that I was surrounded by in the job I was doing there, I would probably say wasn't as positive. And certainly in the early days of running a business, definitely wasn't positive. But I think as I've got older, maybe as I've been more selective, maybe as I've surrounded myself with more supportive men. But right now, as my life stands, I've got, two amazing male line managers at the universities who are very pro equality. And I feel very blessed. And I've got lots of great business mentors around me who, again, are very pro equality. But it wasn't always like that. And I think what disturbed me this weekend was actually talking to my coming up 20-year-old daughter, and her experience wasn't a lot different to when my experience at 19, 20 as well, which kind of made me kind of not freak out, but I did think, gosh, not a lot's changed. This isn't good. Not a lot has changed.
But one of the things you were saying is that actually the only reason she opened up was that you opened up, and that's a really important thing for us to recognize, that people don't always talk about these things.
No, we do need to have conversations. I think everybody who's been touched by, and anybody who hasn't been touched by this weekend needs to have a conversation within their family unit to find out how the females in the family, the mums, the grandmas, the children are feeling, what their experiences are, because I think there is just so much we don't say, whether we're in business or we're working for a company. We need to have these conversations and we need to bring them to the forefront so that we can feel safer and we can support one another better. But that's probably a whole different podcast.
Well, in business, I know that nowadays, my understanding is that you don't get harassed, you don't feel out of place as a woman necessarily, and I think a lot of that comes down to experience and where you've gone. But just talk me through being a woman in business in the earlier days and what you see and hear from other women, I guess. How do they, how can you possibly go from somewhere to then opening your own business? That must be a really difficult thing as a woman, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, well, it was, I grew up in the 80s in Teesside against the backdrop of the kind of industry and mass unemployment. So I guess I was on the back foot anyway. And then when I went into business, I'm going to put myself out there and say it wasn't something women did, especially what I chose to do. I don't even think men were really doing it much either. There wasn't that entrepreneurial spirit back then. But I definitely think it was a tough route for me to go along. Ironically, I kind of did feminism modules when I was studying in my degree. So that was kind of quite an interesting perspective, because then when I went into the workplace, I was kind of shocked a bit by what I then was presented with. And I think some of it's about naivety, and I think how we can shortcut it now. Because I'm gonna put myself out there and say I think that we've got a much more supportive environment for startup businesses, whether we're male or female. Just now in general, there are a lot more incubators, a lot more programs, there are a lot more people out there advising and prepared to hold your hand, whether that's through the bank or through the LEP. There's lots of opportunities out there to get supported and shortcut those early stages. So I think a lot of what I probably experienced was naivety, maybe not being taken seriously enough because I was quite young. I was 20, and I was a little bit wet behind the ears because I'd never run a business or had any experience. So some of the things I think you can avoid now. But I generally think it is just a more equal environment. But then again, I've been shocked by the stories I've read this weekend online and the stories that women have put and the videos that I've put out. So there are obviously industries that are still very rife with that inequality. And we do, for that reason, we need to have these conversations.
Yeah, it's certainly, I've seen the same. It's certainly got conversations going, and there is as people talk, and more people open up and to hear some of the stories. I guess I've been surprised in a way that that certain things are still going on in the workplace, and as you say, maybe it's down to certain industries, or is it across the board? And I'm really not sure. I know that there's a huge agenda to try and change things, but are things changing enough and quickly enough? That's the question, really, isn't it?
I think it is. I think when you talk to this, probably I hope there's women listening today that have had conversations with their daughter, and men that have had conversations with their daughter over the weekend. And I learnt my daughter, very innocently had a bum tapped at work by a male colleague, but then didn't report it because she didn't feel like she could report it without there being consequences and a fallout. Maybe we need to have a reporting system without those consequences. Maybe those are the infrastructures we need to set up, that we do feel that we can step forward and say, this has happened to me and it needs to stop, so that we can make sure people know it's not an acceptable way to go about working, whether it's working for yourself or working for another person. It's not acceptable.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's something that happens in smaller or larger organisations, or if there's pockets or what really. But there certainly needs to be more awareness and feel that feels safe to be able to bring things up, and because we were talking about something earlier. It's very easy for a woman to believe they just won't be believed if they were to say something. And the decision will be made on whatever the man says, and that must make it even more difficult. But one of the things we were also talking about here is that we don't want to tarnish men either. It's a pocket of men. I'm not sure how big that is, but there's and it's not all men all over the place. There was this call for a 6 p.m. curfew for all men last week, which I think is awful that we've sort of got to that state, and then there's talk about expecting men to cross the road when there's a woman walking at night. And one of my passions I feel about there is actually I'm quite scared about going out at night time. Whether that sounds strange or not, it's really true. I'd arranged to take a call on a walk. I quite like walking when speaking, and it was arranged at 6:30. And the week before, there'd been an assault in our local park against a guy at 6:30 the week before, and I didn't want to go. So it's difficult because at the same time, there's a pocket of us men that are scared as well. Yeah, so. Yeah. I don't know what you think to all of that, because I am interested in other people's thoughts and opinions, and we've got to find a way, something that is a balance, really.
I think you're right. I think this is all about safety. This conversation this weekend, Reclaim the Streets, is all about women feeling safe. The curfew was an example to let men know, rightly or wrongly, that after a certain time, women don't feel safe. But equally, we have to acknowledge that men have exactly the same anxiety around being out late because of knife crime, because of assaults, because of other things. So it's a big societal problem around us feeling safe on the streets. And I think that we just got to keep talking. There is no solution right now. There isn't a solution right now. What did I say? I've got an 18-year-old son, and I was like, okay, we've got to be really careful now. We need a conversation about what you will do. And he's going, I don't know what I'll do, Mum, because I don't know when am I going to be in that situation. I drive. Okay, well, we need to talk about that. And it's freaked him out this weekend, because now he's gone, okay, well, what I would have done is follow my instinct and make sure that woman felt safe. And now I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I don't want to freak her out. So how do I make it? So I think we've just got to keep talking, and maybe on some level there needs to be something through the school system, maybe it's through the government, that kind of sets a way of being, almost, so we know a set of principles that we can be guided by, so that women do feel safe and men feel safe equally. Whether that's more police presence. There's a bigger picture here, isn't there? There's a much bigger picture, and we've only got half an hour, so, and I'm no expert, and I don't want to
What's good though, and you've pointed this out earlier, is that the talking about now startups and opening a business. What is good is that not only are there lots of incubators, but it's clearly a government policy and a country policy really to promote small businesses. I mean, that's clear to see, I think, and because of that, there's loads of government money, EU money, government money. Not sure where it all comes from, but especially with Brexit, who knows? But there is a lot of grants around. There's a lot of incubators around for small businesses. I guess you must be reasonably tapped into that, especially with your work at the unis as well. But what are the typical barriers, whether you're male or female, when you've got this idea and you're wanting to make it happen? What are where do people get stuck, and how do you take it from that idea to actually, trading?
Yeah, you're right. There's never been a better time. I was asked this question last week in a talk I did, and it said, do you think this is one of the best times? And I actually said, I do think it is. When I think about where I've come from, and then I've obviously been in the startup arena for over 25 years. So I've seen lots of things come and go in terms of support. I don't think I've ever seen the presence of support now, which is brilliant. And for me, just kind of like, the concept of change, it is slow in a society, but it will happen if we keep going in the right direction. I think the startup world is evidence of that because we've identified that more and more people have a desire. There was a piece of research published last year, and it claimed that 83% of 18 to 24-year-olds have a burning desire to be self-employed, and over 63% of the workforce actually want to be self-employed. So the right to direct this support into that arena, because the appetite's there, isn't it? People want it. The barriers that I find are kind of very split. They're very practical versus self. So there's practical barriers of support. Financial is huge. Like, how do I raise the capital to get going? But the startup loan company are brilliant. You can get up to 25,000 to get a business off the ground. So there's lots of wonderful opportunities now to get that initial business off the ground. But then there's the other side of it, isn't there? There's the self, there's your head, the confidence, the inner chatter, that negative blabber that we go on, what if I fail? What if this? What if that? And so when I'm doing a lot of my sessions, I kind of try to I've got all these toolkits that I can kind of roll out, which are really practical, great ways of getting from A to B. Business plans, business model canvas, cash flow projections, you name it, we've got it. And then the opposite side is, okay, how do we get them through the self bit? How do we get them stopping listening to that negative blabber and turn it into a positive? And I'm a vision coach. So part of the work I do in my session is we set goals and we look at how we kind of like bring those goals to life. And we kind of reflect on trying to stay in that positive space. And if we can't be in the positive space, stay in a neutral space. But then try and not get into the negative space. Yeah. So there's lots of things I think that are barriers. But I think as well, one of the things, it doesn't matter what age you are, it's the concept of not being taken seriously. I don't think there'll be a startup, male or female, in the land that wouldn't say at some point they've pitched their idea to somebody to a blank face or a negative reaction. And even though what they ended up doing was brilliant, the response initially was they just weren't taken seriously. So again, it's understanding that somebody can have an opinion, but it's personal to them and not necessarily, you don't have to take that on board. And I think experience makes you realise that we don't have to engage with everybody's opinion about our idea. We can be selective. But yeah.
And but those experiences are really important. I mean, you know as well as most, you've been through a huge number of experiences in your business life, and but it's about taking each of those experiences, negative or not, and learning from them and adapting and using some resilience, I guess, to then know, well, okay, actually, this is why that failed. These are the things that I need to implement differently. So I think I think they're all learning experiences, aren't they, really?
Oh yeah, and if I think about how I ended up making it, if that's what you want to call it, or how I turned tide.
When was that making it moment?
6 months in, So 6 months, it's funny because I talked about this last week, so anybody who's listening might go, oh, she talked about this last week. But basically, I got to this 6 month point, and I was told by my accountant, to this day, he'll never know how much he influenced. That kind of tough love, basically, you're out of time, Sarah. You know, that whole, like, you've got to look in the mirror and go, actually, I've got to own this. And then I went away and I did a series of things to kind of turn the tide. And I think I'd say by the first birthday, my first birthday, I'd turned that tide and I'd switched it, and I started to realise I was onto something here and it could go places. So between 6 months and a year, that's when I really knew. And I keep saying it now, that those early days, those first few years, are when you build such resilience. Those early stages of keeping on going. It's never going to be as hard as it is at the beginning. It certainly is challenging, but never as hard as that beginning, getting that cash flow going, getting people to buy into what you're doing. Yeah, those are the difficulties, and that really teaches you lessons to then harness your growth further down the line.
You're clearly more passionate on the product side, but you also are reasonably confident that you work with service businesses as well. That's right, isn't it? Yeah. But you are passionate on the product side. On the product side, it's one of the barriers, one of the mistakes, too much time and money and focus on the prototyping, or is that a really important part? How important is that part? And because I've seen people invest so much money at that stage, what are your thoughts on that time?
It's a balancing act, isn't it? It's a balancing act. I know businesses that have focused on it and never ended up bringing it to market because then somebody saw it and then they copied them, and as a result they never got theirs to market in time because those other people turned it around. I think it's a very, I liken it to shark infested waters at times, the product industry, because you've got these mature sharks, a circle, and then these big sharks in the middle, like I used to be, and you're just waiting to get the big shark like nip you to go, shouldn't have done that. So it's kind of like having your wits about you, I think. And I think only you know your industry. I don't think there's any kind of recipe. At the end of the day, you've got to respond. Like, for example, my last business, I had to be super agile and I had to get my products out there really, really quickly because the copy threat was there from the word go. It was there the moment I launched. I could see that if I didn't get out there as first, then I'd be over before I even started. So yeah, I think it just depends on what business you're in. But I'm always going to say the quicker the better, to try and maybe firm up your prototype as quickly as possible. And that comes with experience, I guess. When you work with people like me, we help you shortcut some of the processes so you can do that quicker. So you do feel more confident that you've covered every aspect. I guess as well, in our sessions, we look at every aspect. We make you think about, have you got this covered? Have you got this covered? So that you don't end up getting, maybe they're about to launch 9 months down the line and then you realise you've missed this critical factor. So we try to kind of make sure we've thought of everything for you in the early stages.
You're looking to work with startups, but also established businesses that are looking to grow and to sort of take that next step. What do they typically look like? Are they? Is there a particular size that you fit well with? Is there a particular industry or sector, or is it just quite mixed? Is there a particular ownership type? You know, is it a family business? Is it a small business? Is it, or is it just all quite mixed?
Yeah, it's all quite mixed, but I think that the one thing all of my clients have got in common is a commitment for growth.
Okay.
I think that is the key factor. I think I can work across multiple industries and sectors. The reality is it's down to the people within the business to want that growth, because sometimes getting somebody like me in equals change. Maybe you have to improve your processes to facilitate growth. I mean, it's a classic that I get people in saying, I want more sales. It's like, well, great, but let's look at what your processes are, because if I go get your sales with you, how are you then going to process those orders? Yeah. You know, what's the supply chain look like? Especially in the early stages of like one-man band territory, they might be making their own products, or it might be a bit of a cottage industry. Well, we'll have to get them into premises and we have to get equipment in. We have to improve those processes to facilitate the extra orders. So those are the sorts of things. But the most important thing for me is that they want to make it happen, because you don't bring someone like me in who's very driven and very passionate and very kind of prescriptive about routes, because there is a science behind growth. If you don't want to kind of then take that advice on board and grow your business.
Sorry, there was you were just making me think about something, and then it turned. So I've lost my train of thought on it. Apologies. So on the growth aspect, what's the sort of commitment? How can you tell if they want to? Because it's all well and good saying that, I want to grow, but how can you really validate if they really mean it? Are there any obvious signs or any things that sort of traits that you think, I can see they clearly want to grow?
Honesty. There you go. That is the thing. Like, I work best because I am quite a down-to-earth, honest person. I work best with that honesty. So it's that concept that you can come into a session and you just get a feeling that they're not being honest. And so the most important thing is, like, I don't know about you, I wish I had £1 for every time I've struggled or freaked out or had those moments of, oh my goodness, before I've then pushed through it. And I would probably be a millionaire just by that alone, because, and I think it's that, isn't it? It's about being honest with yourself. It's about saying, today, I really am not feeling it. And I'm struggling. I'm struggling with my head. I'm struggling with this. Because growth is not just about, it's a mindset. It's not just about a physical kind of recipe for success in terms of growing the product or growing the service. It's also about the people behind the business, the people running the business, and how they're feeling. And sometimes we have to, and that's what's so great about kind of what I offer, I think sometimes, is it's a fusion, because I've walked in their shoes. Like, the biggest, and I know we always go back to Dragon's Den, but the biggest thing I suffered with Dragon's Den was imposter syndrome after the event. I was crippled with it. I was literally crippled with it. Why are people saying such lovely things about me? But I'm still only Sarah. Why are they saying I'm an inspiration? I'm not an inspiration. I've just had a terrible thing happen and I moved through it. And, so I kind of feel like I work well with people who can be honest with me in the session. So sometimes we might work on the business, but then sometimes we might work on themselves and helping them get over that hurdle of potentially where they're at that day.
This goes back to the self part. I mean, just briefly, what went wrong with Dragon's Den. Just to remind me why it went wrong.
It didn't go wrong per se. It was just a catalyst for a rocky 12 months afterwards, which then ultimately ended with me saying, okay, we're going to have to call it a day because it didn't work out. It wasn't Dragon's Den. It was just a number of things over that year, and it's very time.
They bought in, didn't they?
Yeah. No.
But this then caused problems for 12 months afterwards.
It's a long story, and it's probably another session. But the reality is, we got on the program, we got given the money, but actually, reality is, after the due diligence, we didn't get it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But the reason that I bring it up though was because what you're not recognizing is, to get to that point is huge.
Oh yeah, I know.
The fact that I can't imagine the number of applications they get, the number of whatever you might call it, interviews or whatever you might have then had to go through the process. And then to get to the point where you've been blooming given an offer. Whatever happens next, I think that is inspirational. And so whilst and I know you've always struggled with this, but I think it is.
Okay, well, that's very kind of you. And you're right, it is, and I can see that now. And I think this goes back to this conversation that we're having, isn't it? It's all about how as we go through, we touch base with people who are more experienced than us, who then say, actually, that was brilliant. And then you go, oh, okay, I see a different take on it. And it's that experience that I then take through to my clients now of understanding and being able to harness that. I couldn't at the time. I was still in my growth phase myself. I couldn't just, like some people, And maybe that was to do with the fact that I was very open about my son dying, and I'd probably been very closed about that up until that point. That had been very private matter. And then I'd suddenly told 4 million people, who then told 11 million people on Gogglebox. And all of a sudden, it was out in the ether, and something that was very personal. And so I think I probably couldn't just enjoy the process as much as, say, the next person could, because I felt very vulnerable and exposed by declaring that on television. And I've come to terms with it now, and maybe, again, it's another conversation. And I think there's lots of conversations about loss, isn't there? And that's another chat again.
And I think, without you realising, although I think you may have verbalised this with me, I think it's helped you have more of an internal conversation with yourself as well. Yeah. So that can only be a good thing as well. I am very aware of the time. I know that you have to be somewhere. But yes, that we could talk a lot in so many different directions. We could do many podcasts out of this. But Sarah, what's where you're launching in a couple of weeks? That's the website as well, isn't it? Yes. For now, where do you hang out? Where, if people wanted to speak to you about whether it be turning a product into trading within 3 months, I mean, you impressively say that potentially you could turn an idea into trading in 3 months. I love that.
Just by knowing the roots, isn't it? That's the thing.
I love that.
Like putting down on those moments of, should I do this or should I do that? It's like, actually, you need to do this.
Yeah.
And it's out all that ambiguity. Yeah, and LinkedIn probably the best place to find me.
That where you hang out the most?
Yeah, hang out. I hang out anywhere, really. I don't think I'm young enough to hang out anymore, but I do frequent LinkedIn and Twitter. You'll see me active on those 2 channels for my business. And you just follow my name, Sarah Agar-Brennan. There's not many of us, so you'll find me. And I'm happy to jump on a call, half an hour free call, just to say, look, let's talk about it. I do a lot of work around, there's businesses I do help, and I'm a trustee in a charity, and so there's lots of other things I do other than this. But I am super passionate about inspiring the next generation of entrepreneurs. I just am. There's nothing better than that feeling of bringing something to market, whether it's your service or product, and putting yourself out there.
Well, I for sure get motivated every time I speak to you, and I'm always inspired. So, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. If you've been listening, and thanks for watching, please do feel free to share this or subscribe. But for now, that's all. So it's bye from me, and it's bye from Sarah. See you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Johnny Ross audio experience. Thanks so much for joining me. If you want to continue the conversation, head over to my website, fleek.marketing, or find me on LinkedIn. That's all for today. Please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, tag me in your social media posts, and please leave me a review on iTunes. It will make a huge difference for me. I will see you soon.